everybody, it's Miss C. So today we're going to be doing the last stitch on our stitch sampler, the ladder stitch. This stitch in particular is a utility stitch meant to help close up holes in a very invisible sort of way. So this is the stitch that you're going to use mainly to close up your little stuffed animal parts for our project so that they're not visible from the outside, and possibly attach the limbs to the body. But you can also use a whip stitch for that. So whenever you have it set up, you have it on either side of this line over here. And the first thing that we're gonna do for this is we're actually gonna cut this apart because, as I said, this is gonna be closing up holes. So for this, we're gonna go ahead and make a hole. Now, first things first is that if this were a proper hole, we would fold this under just like we did with the whip stitch over here, how we folded the edge of our patch under. We're gonna do the same thing right here, right along that line. You can do it right along your dots as well. I'm gonna do that over here so you can kind of see what that looks like. This fold is essentially going to act as the end of our little stuffed animal arm, as it were. And then whenever we hold it together, we're gonna hold it together a little bit like so when we actually start the stitching process. Now, I already have my needle with its thread on. I don't have too much, but it is a little bit like twice the length of the area that I'm doing. I like to have at least that much so that I know that I'm working from an appropriate amount. So the first stitch that I'm gonna do is actually coming up from underneath on one, like normal, but I'm coming up from underneath past that little hole. So it's gonna kind of like that. Now I'm gonna hold this in place like I normally would.
Let me go from this side, actually.
Yeah. And here we go.
So where's one on the other
So
side?
here's one, here's two, here's three, here's 4, 5, and 6. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go from 1 over here over to 4 on this other side. I'm gonna go down on 4, or right down on this edge right here. And because of that fold, I have to be a little bit more careful. And then I'm gonna come up on 5. So down on 4, up on 5. It's this kind of look right here where I'm kind of just grabbing this stitch length from the edge, that folded edge. I'm gonna go across. I don't need to pull it super tight just yet. I'm just gonna hold it like so. Now from 5, I'm gonna come back across to 2. And just like I did before, I'm just gonna grab, kind of go underneath. See here, this is incorrect because I've gone all the way through the fabric. I just really want that first layer. So I'm kind of sliding in this little tunnel right here and coming out at 3 right here. So you can see that I'm going through between those bits of fabric. If I pulled this further apart, you could see that I'm going like so, but we're gonna be holding it together like this. So pull that. And again, I'm not trying to pull super hard yet because I don't want to run out of stitches. I'm going to come across, down on 6, and up on this next dot, like so. Again, not going through my fabric, just coming up through that first layer. If I can grab it. Oh no, I think I'm done. But it's across and through, across and through, across and through. So it'll look a little bit like a whip stitch, and it'll act a little bit like the satin stitch that we did. Anyhow, so I'm gonna continue this pattern of going through, across, and then through the fabric until I get all the way to the end. And then I'm gonna show you the fun little thing that this particular stitch does that other stitches do not, that make it look invisible. All right, so this is what my fabric looks like right now. All of my stitches going across and then between the layers of fabric to go up, and basically making like a squared off zigzag right here. But here's the fun thing about our ladder stitch, which is the thing we had to avoid in our satin stitch, which is if you pull this, the entire thing zippers shut until you can't see any of your stitches anymore. This is why we use it to close up invisible seams on your stuffed animals. You'll sometimes see a little wiggly seam somewhere. That's usually where they've done this pulling. And it's why we close up our arms and legs and such on our stuffed animals with this stitch. Now, I have done my pulling, which means now I need to actually knot off my thread, which is going to be very, very similar to what we've done before, except we're gonna make a stitch to make our loop. Instead of going underneath a nearby stitch, we're going to make a very small whip stitch right here. This is a whip stitch. This one is done flat down here. This one's done on an edge, but it's the same stitch. We're gonna pull until we have a little loop, go through our little loop and pull, then make a new little stitch in that same exact spot, pull until we have a little loop, and go through that little loop. Now, this will always be a little bit visible on the outside of our fabric. However, we do want to try and bury this thread. So right now it's hanging out on the outside of our stuffed animal, so to speak. So what you do is you kind of go down somewhere nearby and then come out about an inch or two away. Then when you pull, you're gonna pull it tight, and then you're gonna pull it a little more tight, so it scrunches in on itself. Once it scrunches in on itself, you can snip, and when it unscrunches, that little end disappears, and the tail that we had is now inside our stuffed animal, or in this case, on the back. So yeah, that is a ladder stitch. Bye.